La Vista Police Department in California. So Jennifer, when we look at this latest case, there's been a lot of big developments over just the past week for the most part. They found the remains of the victims, alleged victims, I should say, on the property of one of the suspects. What does this court case look like moving forward from this point forward?
Well, there's a lot of things that have to be done to take a case from finding the victims to actually presenting it to a jury. And the thing that the investigators will need to do and the district attorney will need to do is make sure that all the loopholes have been closed so that they can absolutely connect the bodies and the crime to the people that they have charged with this crime. So that is what they're doing now. They are looking for physical evidence that will absolutely connect the bodies and the gravesite with the perpetrators of this crime.
And this has been a process that I feel like law enforcement has been working slowly to make sure that they do exactly what you're talking about. Make sure that they don't miss anything. Make sure there's no missteps that could result in a mistrial or something like that. I mean, I remember it wasn't too long ago where everybody was talking about these parents traveling around the country from Idaho to Hawaii, back again, and people asking, why aren't there arrests being made when it's clear that these children are missing? Is that really what was going on in order to make sure that there were no missteps in this entire process?
Correct. Sometimes criminal justice system can be very slow, and it's a very painful process, sometimes bringing people to justice. And the reason for that is that every single step of the way, you have to make sure that everything has been done absolutely correctly. And that's a cornerstone of our criminal justice process, to make sure that we convict the people who actually perpetrated the crime. So in this case, it's complex. We found the bodies on this property, but that doesn't mean that either of these two people actually killed these victims, right? So there has to be a connection. Not only were they on Chad's property, but you can connect them either via eyewitnesses or some sort of surveillance or actual physical evidence. You can connect them to the bodies or to the implements used to destroy the bodies or to bury the bodies or to the gravesite itself. And that just takes time. It really takes a lot of time, but you don't want to have any mistakes, because by the time you get in front of a jury, that's it. You have to have it absolutely perfect. And juries expect a lot. They expect a lot of forensic evidence. There's so much that we can do forensically. They want to see all of it. So part of it is putting together a case that is so obvious that the jury has to come back with the verdict that you've asked them to.
And you bring up an interesting point, too, and it's the idea that, as of this point, I don't believe either one of the suspects have been charged with murder. It's conspiracy up to this point, which I think kind of does play into what you're talking about, too, is they want to make sure that they first get all this evidence in place, they get the timelines, all the forensic evidence in order before maybe they pursue additional charges, at least at this point, or hopefully maybe even getting some answers out of these suspects at some point. Since there are two, you have to acknowledge that maybe there may be a plea or something else, maybe more evidence does come to light. And Jennifer, when we talk about this case, too, sometimes the conversations being had in the media aren't the same conversations that make their way into the courtroom. The jury instructions are very narrowly tailored in order to ensure justice, that outside facts aren't getting in, hearsay, things of that nature. So when we look at exactly what's going on right now, what can the jury take into account? Will it be something a little bit more different than the conversation you and I are seeing in the media?
Yes, I've actually been part of several high-profile crimes that have been covered extensively in the media, and what's being talked about in the public or with the media isn't necessarily what's being considered behind the scenes. So here, it's absolutely imperative that the trial be very fair. So evidence that doesn't pertain to the crime specifically or might be prejudicial to the jury will be kept out, so that when people are convicted of a crime, they're convicted on evidence that is absolutely certain, that can allow a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, based on the evidence, to convict someone. So that's a long and painful process, and that's, I'm sure, what they're involved in right now.
And I think that's an important point, too, the reasonable doubt standard. Of course, prosecutors are going to bring in every type of evidence that they can just to instill a little bit of doubt that maybe it was this individual who committed the murder, but you have to be almost certain beyond that reasonable doubt qualifier. And I think that is something that sometimes gets distorted a little bit. The evidence may seem overwhelming, but the system is designed to make sure that guilty people do not go to jail for something they didn't commit. And that's why the burdens on the prosecution in a case like this is to ensure that beyond a reasonable doubt, you can prove that person did it. I think that's an important thing that sometimes gets lost in these types of cases, but I think you're exactly right to say that that's exactly what they'll be looking at and the jury is looking at as well. But Jennifer Shen, I appreciate you coming on, breaking down this case for us. Thank you.